Alrighty. Hello everyone. Okay, I can't see people. Can you give me some sum up if you can hear me or can see me? Okay, awesome. Thanks everyone. So welcome to Unstack'd event in 2023. It's very exciting to see so many people join. A big welcome to everyone. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodian of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So before we start, I would like to know where is everyone dialing from. If you can just throw your location into the chat function so we can know where people dialing from. Melbourne, Sydney, Melbourne, welcome. Did I say Brisbane? Ballarat. Great. All right. So thanks everyone. A big welcome to everyone dialing, and also thanks everyone to use your long time to join. So I just want to start with a bit intro for myself. So my name is Lou Jia, and I started in RE around 4 years ago, and as a full stack developer. And I decided to change my career to become a mobile developer. And now I am the lead mobile developer in REA group. Next slide, please. Talking about REA group, how many people have heard REA before? Can I say sum up, sum down? Yes, no? Sum up? Wow, that's great. Awesome. I saw a lot of people already know REA. That's awesome. I'm still going to use this opportunity to give a bit intro for REA. So REA Group was a startup company back in 1995, and we have grown into a leading digital business specializing in property. At REA, we changed the way the world experiences property. So whether you're looking for buying, renting, or selling property, or if you just want some financial support around property, REA is here to help you along your property journey. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. Unstack'd is REA official group meetup, and we're trying to cover different topics and bring all kinds of people together from different backgrounds and disciplines. It's a place to connect, unpack challenges, and learn from each other. And we're super excited to build the Unstack'd community, and we can't wait to share our experience beyond REA. As we all know, mobile becomes more and more important for everyone, and the mobile technology keeps evolving every day. That makes mobile development become the key focus for a lot of people, for a lot of companies. And of course, REA is one of them. So today, we're going to talk about the mobile journey at REA Group. In the next 40 minutes, we will hear Elisha talking about how mobile development has evolved in REA. And we'll have another 15 minutes for Q&A. And then would really appreciate that if you could complete the survey at the end of the session to help us improve this event in the future. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. So even though we're doing the remote event today, we still want this event to be as interactive as possible. So here are a few ways that you can get involved. Please use the chat function to share your views, your thoughts, your comments during the talk. And there is a Q&A function that you can use to asking the questions. So if you have any questions during the session, please just put the questions in the Q&A section. And we'll try our best to answer this question either in a live or we can reply that from the message. And when we're talking from webinar, we can't really see people's face. So it's really hard to say how people reaction to this, to the talk. So please give us some reactions and show your encouragement during the session. Now, let's welcome our speaker today, Elisha Lye, Mobile Tech Lead at REA Group. Elisha, you here?
Hi, Lou Jia. Yeah, I'm here. Can you
Hey,
see me?
hey, yeah, I can see you. Yeah, great. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. It's really awesome to have you here today. Do you want to give us some intro for yourself?
Oh, sure. Thanks. I am a mobile tech lead at REA. I started off my software development career in the semiconductor industry. Then later I switched on to mobile development, focusing in particularly on Android. So times like it has been almost a decade. Out of that, I've spent almost 6.5 years in REA today. So almost reaching 7 years, which means that I'm almost reaching my long service leave. Can't wait for that.
Wow, that's exciting. You must have seen through a lot of RE mobile journey.
Yeah, a bit of it, but REA mobile development has much longer history than me at REA. So actually, I owe a lot of them, like learning from all the pioneering teams in the past.
Yeah, that's true. At REA, I think we always learn from each other. I still remember that when I started my mobile journey around 3 years ago, I don't really have much mobile experience at that time. What I have is my team and the mobile community. So I learned from my team members. I learned from mobile guild, mobile dojos, which hosted by the community. I have to say, it's a mobile community that makes me today. Um, so, well, it's very awesome that we can share our experience with a wider group. And I'll stop talking and hand over to you to start our topic. All yours, Elisha.
Thank you so much, Lucia. Yeah, it's great to know that you have learned so much mobile development in REA. So REA actually, we kind of have this community of learning, exploring, and sharing. And I'm such a privilege today to have shared with you, to come here and share with you how we have transitions our architectures from the very humble beginnings to where we are in terms of scaling mobile development. So before I kind of start, it's a little bit good to introduce what is REA about, Real Estate Australia. So realestate.com.au. So we are actually an Australian digital marketing company focusing on property advertisements. So we started off back in 1995, a humble beginning in a garage where we serve the web view to the end users. So fast forward, we are going to talk about mobile, right? So in 2010, Apple came out with this, well, iPhone. Surprise, the world was stormed the world, iPhone. iOS came out. So that back then, that's the time where REA. So let's get onto this industry. Let's also build our REA real estate app. You see the little red button over here is actually our real estate app logo that we have is on iOS. We ship it back in 2010. And 2012, another business that we have is called Real Commercials. In the blue color, we also ship another iOS app back then with the rise of iOS. Later, what happens is Google caught up. They came out with something called the Android operating system for smart devices as well. So that is where we also start to ship the real estate app for our Android devices, as well as the Blue app for the real commercial apps for the Android devices. So that is where we have journeyed so far. And after 2016 and 17, there are more and more mobile developments. People are getting on mobile phone. People are using phone more than webs. There's a lot of engagement over there. So we continue to ship even more apps. Back in 2018, we shipped another app called the Ignite app. This Ignite app is very customer-centric apps. It's an app specifically for our customers. And then 2010, we acquired a company called Flatmates. And also we create an app called Flatmates apps for people who are renting out their rooms and things like that. So that we have in total today in the market 4 major apps that we have. So going back to a little bit of how we start off our development. So clearly back in 2010, we have one iOS team. We built our iOS team. We build it up, we set it up and release our app. So, and at that time, we wouldn't have started Android team because there's no Android such a thing back then. There is actually, it's still very primitive. So, but then in 2014, we see the growth of an Android side. So we develop Android apps as well. We also have another team for Android development. And fast forward to today. So this is where we have about 10 different teams contributing to our mobile development on the REA app itself. So this is how we have journeyed from a single teams to 10 teams that's contributing to this app. So the questions and the things that we want to share with you is the journey that we have over here from a single teams to multiple teams contributing to the app, how we do it scalably. Well, before I share the story of our development, a little bit of goals and guides we have, the principle we are falling into, and what define us saying that how we, the definition of success, we call it development. So we have 3 goals we want to achieve. One, we call it development scalability. We want to scale our development where we want to ensure that as we need more features, you can easily add them scalably. Secondly, we want to ensure our development is flexible, which means that teams have the flexibilities to kind of evolve and change accordingly, so they can just manage it without being constrained. So in a development world, you know that sometimes scalability and flexibility doesn't go hand in hand, but we want both of them. Yeah. And last and very importantly, we also want to make sure that developer experience, we want to make sure that developers who are building apps in our team are happy. They are able to do what is best. They are able to experience it. So with all these goals in place, there's also some guide in place, you know, that the basic guides that say how I want to develop our mobile development. So the basic guides we have is our development want to get as close as possible to the platform, which means that we are developing on iOS and Android specifically, as close as possible to Apple and Google. Secondly, we try to leverage the latest technology trend we have. Today, we are using Swift, Kotlin, Jetpack Compose, and Swift UI in our development to release the latest feature. So that forms the basis of our REA development practice. Well, let me get on to the next one. A poll for everybody. We like to understand who you are, what development language are you using? Maybe let's put on a poll right now, just get a little bit of feedback from all of you. Nice, we have quite a bit of people on Kotlin, on Swift, and Swift and Kotlin. Very nice, yeah. Yeah, and others as well. Now we have a very balanced audience over here. Some from Android, some from iOS, from both platforms. Some are using other things. Some are actually maybe more delivery leads or maybe a product manager. So, all right. So you can see the results. That's good. We have a very good balance of people over here. So this talk is actually aiming for not only for purely mobile developers, but people who are interested in explore architectures with mobile development. So it's great to have all of you here. All right, let me proceed on. So thanks for all your inputs, appreciate it. And with that, let's go to how we have developed from a single teams to multiple teams. I break them down into 3 eras. We started off something called the monolith era. Monolith era. This is where we are building everything on a single module. And then this is the base of our learning journey. You know, we start, we learn, explore, and all this thing. As you know, every learning journeys we discover there are some limitations we have. We don't scale our development back then, so we explore something and improve it to another thing we call the federated era. Federations means something that we allow other teams to contribute to our code base, and we call this federated, and then hopefully we can scale the development. But nonetheless, from the learning journeys, it is not as good as what we want. So we explore and expand it further to change to something what we call the micro-frontend era. So micro-frontend era is what the emphasis of this talk today we are. But I'm going to give you a little detail of monolith era and federation era before that to appreciate why we are going towards the micro-frontend era. So back in the monolith era, so before the advent of all this iPhone, Android, iOS, we are having services to the web world. So that's our main way of engaging our audience. So back in 2010, as I've shared earlier, we have started iOS development, and we do have a bunch of technology or iOS skill that we start to learn, Objective-C, and later we change to Swift, your Encrypt, NIP, Zip, MVC, core data, and change to RAM and view controller, all sort of iOS terminology you can think of. And that is where there's all this learning journey. We grow, we evolve on the same code base we have. So it has a fragments of various iOS tech stack. So in 2014, same for Android. Start off with Java. That's the only language we use. And then later we transitioned to Kotlin back in 2017 when Google announced that. It's great. So SQLite and Dagger 2 and XML, the layout, and then MVP, RX Java. I'm not sure back then we have coroutine Kotlin, but yeah, a bunch of technology we're using, event bus. So all these things we evolve, we learn. That back time, the evolution of mobile development is so fast, so rapid. We've changed things. So during those times, we also hired contractors comes into our organizations to help scale up the development as well. They enhance the team skills. It's great to have them together with us. But after a while, they've completed their tenure with us, so they move on and then we continue to have our teams supporting the app. So with that, throughout this period, it's great. We ship our apps to millions of people. A lot of people are using apps. It's already live out there. But nonetheless, you probably suspect and see some structural challenges we see. So I'm going to list 4 items, some 4 limitations over here. The first one, iOS versus Android. So we have 2 different teams. One is iOS, one is Android. Very differing in stack, very different in design patterns. In terms of some features, maybe they are differing as well because the capability of 2 platforms is different back then, but we are trying to make a parity. So the next challenges we have is messy structure. It's not because we don't structure it properly, but because tech rapidly change and evolve. So we continue to learn and keep up to it. And add on as well, people movement. There are contractors who come in, who goes, and the team change a little bit here and there. So that's that contributes to some of the structures become a little bit more messy than what we hope it to be. And the third, as you know, mobile development continue to have improvements. The needs of that. So the markets grow, but we only have 2 teams, one iOS, one Android team. So that becomes a bottleneck. And last and not least, of course, mobile is still new. So we are always like byproducts of what we have. So we are trying to accommodate the services that fits to the web as much as possible. So these are the challenges we see. So with that, we let's try to explore how we can improve it. There comes the federation era. So in this federation era, the first things what we do is, we should combine the iOS and Android teams together and form an architecture team. So right now, iOS, instead of being 2 teams, we have iOS and Android get together, make the build and release process more consistent, having some applications layer, networking, analytics, authentications, all these common functionalities. The team is going to be responsible for that. Other than that, we also learn that we should have special services, particularly for the mobile development. We call it a mobile backend for front end, or in short, BFF. So that layers will shield away all the services that fits in the web, enable us to improve and give first priorities to all the mobile developments we have, which is awesome. So this team also responsible for that sort of development. Then other than that, we also have another mobile teams called the feature teams that we have. Also, it's a combination of both Android and iOS as team together, which builds all the features, user-facing features, and interacts with the architecture team. So, and we clearly know that there's also need to have other teams contributing to the things because there are other business like interested to have their things on the mobile. So this is where we allow teams from other members from other teams to contribute, and that's where the name federated comes in. They federated modules into our features, and that's where we have these combinations of how things work together. Of course, the federation team, other than building just federated modules, they could also build federated features, user features. And since we don't have a very clear definition of what feature is, what is a sub-feature, what is a sub-feature, so things get a little bit more cluttered, so they link up together. And on top of that, feature teams also are living in the same code base as architecture team. So there is no real strong boundaries between them. So feature teams can contribute to the architect's team as well as vice versa. Architect teams also contribute back to the feature. So you probably see a little bit of challenges that we're going to have over here. And the other one that is probably more obvious is we only have one mobile BFF over there. And each of the team also need to have some of the functionality in the service level. So all the teams that contributes to the mobile BFF and congested the mobile BFF. So from this diagram alone, you probably see some challenges that we have. But before we look into all these challenges, let's look at how he has helped us journey on. So if we were to look at our original challenges we have back when we have the monolith era, so we literally solve all these problems. So let me give you explain how. So yes, first of all, we have joined our iOS and Android teams. Our code structure across iOS and Android is much more consistent today. Secondly, we do have much more better structure, like we do have architectures and feature structures. It's more modular based, and iOS and Android is much more consistent, more structure. And we also allow federated development. That means teams from other business groups can contribute their code into our code base, which is awesome. Scale development. And we also have a mobile BFF specifically for our for mobile development. So there is these services that specialize for mobile, give us a first-class citizen experience and shield away changes from the services. Awesome, we solve all these problems. So, however, as we know, as you see in this previous screen, we do have other challenges that surface itself. The problems we have is there's a single custodianship bottlenecks over here. So there's this shared code across like architectures and feature teams, the federations code and feature teams. How do we work across all these teams? This becomes a challenge. Second is the structure of boundary is still very vague. Each of the features, is this a feature? Is this a sub features? How are we going to develop that? It's not very clear as that. So third is lack of autonomy and ownerships. Is actually, this is the way we have it. Is other teams from other groups are federated in our codes. They come and they go. They are required to conform to the patterns we define. So they are lacking of those autonomy, and they work on it and then they move on to other projects. So the sense of ownership is lacking. So that becomes a challenge. And lastly, we mentioned about the BFF, the backend for front end. It's pretty congested because everybody just contribute to that piece of services. Well, with this, we will have to improve. That is where we are going to introduce you to our drum roll to the micro-frontend era. Okay, as per the definition extracted from the source we have, it's not something that REA inherited. It comes from ThoughtWorks by this Cam Jackson, which talks about micro-frontend is actually an architecture style where independently deliverable front-end applications and are composed into a greater whole. So the important part of this is actually the important keyword of micro-frontend is the independently delivered front-end application. It's just not it's not just modular in the sense, but they are independent. That's a very important key. So the whole experience of micro-frontend comes from microservices that they have, which is used very widely on the backend services side. So we are trying to apply same concepts to the front end. So to analog these things is like, instead of building one big houses, let's build small houses and make them work together as a community so that serve better purpose. To provide a further illustrations of what we mean. So if you view the app as a platform, okay, or you have an Android, this is your Android devices that you have over here. And on your Android devices, you can build applications. You can build any applications that you want. As long as you're using the Android SDK, you will build like Google Map apps, Waze apps, WhatsApp apps, or any apps that you want. And they can probably work together by some sort of communications, share features and all these things. So there's an analog of how we are planning to expand our development. And right now, since a little bit times we have, let's share on, maybe get a little bit input from you. Maybe can you tell us in the chat, what apps do you work on? Nice. So we have very good apps. Awesome. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it a lot. All right. So yeah, at least this gives you an opportunity to explore how to ask questions and all these things. Awesome. So we have many great apps. People's representative from different company comes to. Thank you for sharing. So let me proceed. So with that, as we talk about app development, like platforms, right? So what we have over here is, so instead of building every features we have in the app, we are building something we call an app shell layer. It's like a place, a house where we contain the app, contain all the features. And at the same time, we build something we call the foundation layer, which allow people to build the applications and fit into our app. And if anything that they want to have their features get shipped into our apps, what they need to do is they build a little applications based on using the foundations layer, each of them. And we call all these little apps we have micro-frontends. And when they are combined together and bundled together, we can ship as one big app, as a REA app. So each of them actually are like a little application itself, which is stored in something we call the REA app library. In this library, every single tester or users who want to access to all these features, they can literally go and download it and test it. It's like you're building your own little features and get it downloaded, all those things. When they're kind of ready, then we bundle them together and ship it out as one main app. It sounds wow. This is like almost like building applications on a device, like just building applications for our apps. So how does all this work? So I'm going to illustrate each of these layers to you in more detail. Firstly, the applications layer, the app shells layer. So in this app shell layer, there are three main functionality that we have. So the first one is we call the configurations. Just like any apps you want to build, you definitely have to set the configurations, registration, set up all the dependency foundation. This is kind of common, okay? Secondly is entry to the apps. Of course, like any applications, very generic. The application startup, state restorations, deep link handling, or you can name it anything that you need to build an app. You need to have all these item 1 and 2. But what is special about this app shell layer that we have is the app frame and the routing, and which is the core of like how we manage that whole application surface to the user. They form a top level application UI where it's all there to house all the micro frontend we have, all the little small app, the micro frontend, and then connecting them together and make them work together. To illustrate this better, this is like the app frame we have. It is places where we can house all the little features we have. And then we have all these micro front end. We call them MFE for short. And we do build something called routing mechanisms by locating where should we place all these micro front end, which are the part we can put it together. So you can almost like see there's a way to link all these things together and put it up and surface it to the end user. And to make it more seamlessly with the external words, when user deep link into our app, we just need to locate the right micro front end and bring it up and surface it to the user. So the whole mechanism is all combined together. So one of the top people, by looking at the diagram, you might thought that, well, maybe each of these MFE micro front end is one screen by itself, just a single screen. To provide more detail, let's zoom into the look at it. It's actually more than one screen. So on the top side, it's the same as what we showed just now, all the app frame that we have, and then the routing mechanism. And each of the blue box is actually the micro front end. If you look at all these blue box, they are not just one screen. Some of them could contain a screen, which is like on the iPad, you have the list on the left, and on the right-hand side, you have a map. Or you can just, when it's iPhone mode, you can change it, configure it. So this is like a little apps by yourself. And the second one is like, maybe you can have something that have a description, get into the detail, and come back from the description again. So it's almost like a little features. Or if you like to have a wizard style of explorations, you get into apps, go through a sequence of screens before you end your experience over that. So that could be a features by itself. And if you like to also expose more than one screen to the app, then we have more than one screen that get exposed to through the routing mechanisms. The user can still access it. So each of these micro front end is actually a little features, a little apps, a little user experience, what we call it, user experience, and owned by individual team. So if you look at it in terms of ownerships, each of these little micro front ends, they are owned by all these little teams, where they will kind of own it, responsible to work on it, explore, make all the code changes they need. And once they are ready, they just ship to our app store. Our own, we call it REA app library. Then QA can test it from here, experiment it, make sure everything is good. So this makes all this development so much easier, so much seamless, and teams have full ownership on it. And once they are ready, we bundle all these things together and put it into the REA app and ship it out to the market. And of course, we also ship it back to our library for own testing purposes and all those things. But then we can ship it to the Play Store and App Store. So if you were to look at all these things, you can see some characteristics that we have over here. The first characteristic is autonomy. So each team fully owns their piece of micro-frontend. They have very clear separations of ownerships, which means they have this flexible text structure they can use, design flow. It's much smaller code base where they just need to worry about working on within their code base, and it's shippable as an app itself, exploit. So very full autonomy. On the other end, all of them are pretty aligned. First of all, they need to use REA foundations. Secondly, they are linking to each other, micro-frontends using a routing. Third, they are actually containable within an app frame. And also very importantly, we want to ensure that they are not dependent on each other. So if you look at these two things, there's one word to describe them: align autonomy. We have autonomy while it's aligned. This is how we develop our micro-frontend. So to dwell a little bit more within the MFE dependency, so we talked about it's very important for all these micro-frontends not to link to each other to avoid hierarchical relationship or to have a circular relationship. So the way we do it is you use routing. If you want to have communications between two MFE, use routing. If not, use foundations. Use our REA foundations for anything that's common. And if there are things that is like probably needed in two MFEs, small things, let's duplicate them. While this actually helps a lot to ensure there's no dependency across the MFE, but there are some scenarios actually you needed to have some way to share between two MFEs, right? So that's where we are building something called, another layer is called MFE component sharing. So in this component sharing, as we share if we look at the whole MFE architectures that we have, the top layer is a shell layer, the bottom layer is the foundation layer, and in between there's now it talks about all the MFE, which is individually owned, which is good. So to enable them to share things across, we also introduce something called the components, where each of the teams they have ways to share items. Like component 1 is being shared by MFE 2, and component 2 is shared by MFE 1. Right? But that doesn't mean that every team should need to have a components. Like the last team we have, there is no component. If they have nothing to share, that's fine. They have just a screen. Or there are some teams that actually does not have like screen to share at all. They only have parts that want to get into each of the micro-frontend. Like they'll have a special, maybe check-in buttons, maybe advertisements, items they can share. So they just need to have a component layer and share it out. And each of the micro-frontend are able to access that effectively. So it still forms the MFE layer. Well, so that's actually form the whole micro-frontend layer MFE layers that we have. Let's go to the last part that we talked about, the foundation layer, which is the one that forms the base of how we build all the micro-frontend. So in this base layer, what gets into this layer? First, it needs to be something that is common to all MFE. It shouldn't be something that is very specific to each of them, but it's non-MFE specific. It is there to ensure conformity. For example, if you want to do a network and you want to make sure that everyone have a user agent, so this is where we ensure that happens. Conformity. Everybody that use our networks will have a user agent set. That's awesome. And it also enables the MFE to be able to stand alone without worry about all the nitty-gritty details. So that's one of the responsibility. The other one is actually the foundation is also ensure sensible MFE defaults. We provide a large functionality, but we do set some sensible defaults that when MFE uses it, is by default using those settings. But at the same time, they're flexible to reconfigure it according to part of their needs that's differing slightly from other people, from other MFE. And here also we kind of hide all the generic complexities from the MFE, so it actually shields away all this development from MFE. And lastly, extensible extractions. The foundation we built is not just particularly focusing on one micro-frontend, one apps. While it's great to have one apps, all the MFE shared, but we hope that it could be also shared across more than one apps. We allow it to be customized, to be mockable, and then to shield MFE from changes. If you just change some of the items, then some of these MFE will already get the benefit of it. So to do that, the foundation layer within REA, we have two main parts of our foundation layer. So one is we call the capability. This capability parts forms the area that is commonly needed by all the MFE. They are like networking, logging, routing, analytics, authentication, you name it, anything that's commonly needed by all the MFEs, that whenever they want to do something consistently, we have it over here. They can just use it without worrying need to develop on their own. The second part of it is the design kit. We want to ensure consistency in design. So we have like color, font, typography, spaces, components, accessibility. So developers that use all these components doesn't need to worry about all this nitty-gritty detail. So, and then they can use it. So that's the two part that forms the foundation of our development. Well, to describe a little bit more how we can extend the foundations beyond one app, as well as helping the micro-frontend also extend beyond one app. This is one of the philosophy of building our foundations. So imagine if we have a one micro-frontend where we want to use across X app and Y app, and they are using our foundations. So, and our foundation, and they are using one of the things called experiments. They want to do experiments. And so happens that X apps want to use a Firebase experiment. So from an object-oriented point of view, let's build a specific of the foundations called Firebase experiment, like MFE assess it. Then on Y app, there's another app. We also use a foundation, also MFE, but they want to use optimizely. So MFE ones will have to use optimizely experiment specific foundations for Y app. Well, from object-oriented point of view, well, this is all right, this is doing. So one challenge we have is this MFE is no longer as extensible as we want, because in X app, it is tied to Firebase. In Y app, it's actually tied optimizely. So it's the limitations if we were to design in this way. So instead of doing this way, one of the foundations, one of the rules to develop our foundations is let's do it in a reverse order manner instead. Make sure all the MFE are not tied to anything that is specific. They're always tied to this something that's generic or the base layer, experiment layer. So regardless of they are going into X app or Y app, they're just tied to the foundations. The one that configures the specific of the foundation is the X app, is the application shell level. They can define, I'm going to use Firebase. So any MFE that is used by the X apps will automatically get all Firebase. When they move to the Y app, any MFE that use these foundations will get optimizely. So that makes the MFE, not only the foundation more extensible across app, also the MFE much more extensible across app. So which is the green tick sign. All right. So with that, I'm going to, in a nutshell, if you look at, this is our app micro-frontend architectures. That's the way we configure it. We allow different little features as an app itself, combine them together and put as a structure that we ship the whole thing as an app to the outside world. So before I continue on, to give a little bit of understanding, since you know what is micro-frontend architectures, we like to understand what is your current architecture approach. We have a poll for you to just provide your feedback. Cool. We have quite a bit of mixture of MVVM, micro-frontend as well. Oh, wow, that's good. Yeah, there are some organizations using micro-frontend, some are using cross-platforms. That's awesome. Yeah, and MVV, clearly there's a winner because most of the apps just started off from there. Yeah, so that's good to know some great inputs from everybody. All right, thank you very much. Yeah, there's a lot of using MVVM, MVV. This is awesome start. Yeah, and then there are some teams using a federated mode, and some using. There's quite a bit of people using micro-frontend. That's also great to know, and love to learn the experience from you as well. Well, so from here, let me continue on. So thank you for the input. So let's revisit our original three goals that we want to achieve: development scalability, flexibility, and developer experience. So when we talk about scalability, whenever we want to add new features to our app, it's pretty simple. What we just need to do, add another micro-frontend, we get new features. It's much more scalable. And if you talk about flexibility, yes, each of the microfrontend are very autonomous, owned by each individual team. So they have the flexibility of determine how it is being designed and architecture. They can use MVVM, MVP, or anything they like, explore and move on. And thirdly, developers are pretty happy developing in their little world, microfrontend. Instead of have to worry about the whole app, how to build things around, just build very focused and then test it out individually. They are pretty happy about using it. So, but everything has good and disadvantage. So let's look at some of the challenges we are facing. As I mentioned, 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. There's a saying. So if we were to look at the scorecard that we have over here, in terms of clear code ownership and custodianship, Monolith and Microfrontend, clearly Microfrontend is better. Team agility and autonomy, Microfrontend has a better edge. Faster CI build time for individual feature, Microfrontend has an advantage. So, but when it comes to easy and fast integration and debugging, so that's the challenge that we have. And then dependency synchronizations, that's also the challenge that we have. So Monolith is much easier to synchronize all dependency. And common infrastructure upgrades when it comes to Monolith is also a challenge that we have. So we are in looking at all these challenges, we are in the steps of exploring, is there a best of both worlds where we can get all these things? So clearly we are not out of the wood yet. There are still some challenges we need to face, we need to address. There are also things that we still have the old features that on the Monolith and federated era that we need to transition over to the microfrontend architectures. But we are seeing a light shining. There's a way for us to scale development. There's a way for us to make development much more scalable. Each teams are able to contribute it effectively, flexibly, autonomously. So with that, that ends my talk today. And of course, before I finish it off, I want to give credits to the people actually that helps all our preparations for this Unstack'd event. Thanks to Ed, Miles, Alex, and all the Unstack'd team for the setup and review and much more plan. And particularly for Alex Ryan, she's our talent acquisition partner in this event. So she and her teams look after the tech role here. So if you are interested to join REA, explore some of our role, feel free to connect with her in LinkedIn, Alex Ryan. And also, thanks very much to the pioneering architects team, Stuart Allison Shane, Jared Dran, for spearheading the initial microfrontend architectures within REA. And also, awesome thanks to the REA mobile teams who have made all these things possible. Their relentless effort is really much appreciated. All right, I'll pass on the times back to Loja.
Wow, that's a great session. Thanks, Elisha. Let's give another round of applause to Elisha. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I saw a lot of comments and thoughts happen in the chat, and that's really exciting to see people actually like the topic, and a lot of questions coming through as well. So we have about 15 minutes, so let's try to cover as much as we can. Okay, I'm going to throw the questions to Elisha. So let's kick it off. There was a question a bit early from Luke. Asking why is the required to conform to pattern is a bad thing. We have all worked in code base that are the mix of MVP, MVM, wrapper, etc. So having the unified structure that people need to work within gives many benefits in terms of the reliability, consistency.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think the internet is a little bit. Can you rephrase the question, or is the question on the?
So the main question is actually, I think the question showing up when you're talking about in the federation era. So why is the required to conform to patterns is a bad thing?
Oh yeah, that's good question. So for example, if you are building our apps in a MVP fashions or MVVM fashions, developer who contributed to our code base, we want them to very much to stick to the same patterns, because as they move around, some of the features which are very tightly integrated together, we want to make sure that they can move around features seamlessly. So that happens to if we are, because there's many features team like to contribute. So it's important for us to educate them where to put in the code and how to put in the code and all these things, because they don't own the codes. We own the code. So that's where, they need to conform to the patterns and contribute to the code. That's one of the reasons we want to have them conform to all the patterns. I hope that answers the questions.
Thanks, Elisha. And then we have a lot of questions for MFE. So next is that, hey Elisha, in the MFE, is this vertical sliced down to microservices and APIs that lie down the MFE, lie below the MFE?
Very, very, very good questions. In fact, so if you notice, one of the things that we have described in the era 1 and the monolith era and federal era, we talk about services. And in Microfrontends era, we haven't talked about that as much as possible. But you're absolutely right. So in order to make it more efficiently for each of the microfrontends to work effectively or more autonomously, there's a thought of plans. Maybe we should also align the backend services accordingly to the microfrontend to make sure that they scale and not independent, dependent on each other as much as possible. But that doesn't mean that all of them have their own services. They could to share some of one or two common services together within the same team. But that we do allow that flexibility to make sure it's more autonomous.
Yeah, thanks. So next one is, how do you ensure maximum code sharing between each MFE team though?
Yeah, that's another very good question. While we like to have all MFEs, to be consistent as possible, like they have the way of structures. Like if one team use MVVM, all teams use every VM. If you want to use Wiper, all teams use Wiper. Wow, that is nice because we allow people to transition over that. We don't constrain that. The very reason is because, as you see, technology evolve and change over time. In maybe next year down the road or this year, Google I/O or WWDC, they come up with some new ways of working, and some teams want to explore and get onto it faster. So that's why we allow them to have that flexibility or autonomy of tech stacks. They're exploring. They want to get in Jetpack Compose and Shift UI. Some are still on the old XML views or UI kits. So that this sort of microfrontend allow that. While we like them to be consistent as much as possible, we provide them template, all these things, but we do allow that flexibility.
Yeah, and with a template, and we do have our the template for every MFE team can actually use a template to create their own MFE. But of course, that they don't have to always use the same technical stack. People can always choose their own to fit their business requirement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So next one is a question coming from the Q&A. So do you use any of the team structures or collaboration to assist with alignment, or just the technical solutions like vendor REA foundations and the components?
Sorry, I think I missed you out because the internet.
Yes, do you use any of the team structure or collaboration to assist with alignment, or just the technical solution?
Yeah, so do we use team structures? So pretty much our alignment, we do have something called mobile forums that get all the teams together and share and explore ideas together. There are some changes. Of course, within the teams, we still have something we call a native platform or architectural teams that governs the foundations of the development. So that foundations change will affect all the micro front end. So that is where there's this forum that we discuss and explore together, make sure we are all aligned and consistent in that sense.
Yeah, cool. And the next one is so people is curious to know how the app is made observable, are those any of the capabilities exposed by the foundation layer, or does each MFE has freedom to observe independent of the foundation and other MFEs?
Another good question that we have. So if you look at each of the features that we have today, let's not talk about microfrontend. Let's build a simple apps. The way we observe an items, we will probably have some sort of notification observer that one can register into, maybe reactive or something. There is at React repositories. When network comes in and it's stored in database, when update got updated, you get notified. So that sort of management is called, sometimes we name it state management. So it could be something that can build while it's possible to every single apps build their observability, but then the problem is the ability to share them across all the microfrontends will be challenges. So one option is for them to explore, to work it on the component layer. There's some talk about component which allows two microfrontend to share. So if they build that component layer, the other microfrontend can just register to say, I want to know when things change on your side, let me know. So that we allow one. And then if we look at certain patterns of all these observabilities patterns, or sometimes we call it state management, if there are areas we can abstract it to a common foundations that we have, we can build that common foundation so it facilitates the development of observabilities across all the MFE, make it more consistent, but it doesn't constrain what to observe. Each of MFE does still have the ability to say, I just want to observe that or did based on the components layer.
Yeah, thanks. And next one, a bit spicy. How do you handle breaking change in foundation?
Oh, that's especially if you're on the foundations layer on like we have like our design keys and capabilities. This is like any API design. So teams that develops API designs is very much different. The way we structure and the way it works is very much different from the one that working on microfrontend, because they are just user interfacing. They don't worry less about the API and things. So when we handle all these APIs, just like any framework and architectures, we might try to avoid breaking changes as much as possible. Try to introduce, extend the API, all these things. But and then if we can't, we can introduce something or provide a grace time period by having some API deprecated, and then you can move on. And if really at no cost, which we try to avoid as much as possible, is there's no way even to have deprecated, we really have to change the API. Then we can introduce that. Of course, using the name, the standard, I forgot the name of all this versioning to indicate is it a breaking change or not. We just indicate that to the external, all the microfrontend user.
Thanks. And next one is when not to use MFEs.
Sorry, I missed that. Would not to use MFE?
Yeah, when not to use MFEs, because we can't. I don't think we can like use MFE pattern for like every single feature we're building. So what are the cases that we don't use MFEs?
Are very interesting questions for this talk. So we are actually trying to gear towards any new features we have. We want to adopt towards a microfrontend MFE that allows them to be. The main reason is we want to allow them to be exchangeable. Sometimes you might want to have features that, for example, that shows as the first screen of the app, and you say, oh, that doesn't need an MFE, that we just need to app shell, just call or just link into app shell as part of it. But there will be cases where this one day, this might be the one to surface last or surface in somewhere else and all these things. So that's why we prefer all the features as much as possible to be in an MFE as much as possible. So other than things that's pretty common, like anything in the app shell layer, the frame, how you develop all your main container, and how you develop all your foundations, these are not MFE. The rest, like user feature facing things, we like to make them into MFE as much as possible.
Thanks, Elisha. Yeah, I guess we still have 5 minutes, and probably can take another 1 or 2 questions. So there's a very good one is asking, like, moving from the federated architecture to the micro-frontend architecture, how easy or how difficult was it? And what was your main challenges?
Very good questions. So as we at the last part of the slides, I did also mention one of the challenges we have is we are still moving away features, not only from federated, some of them are very old features from Monolith we are exploring. So the challenges is some of these features are not very well partitioned to be as suitable into the microfrontend, and they are the challenge is also because some of these features, so-called in the federated group, are very tangled together. So that's where in order to move them out as a microfrontend, either one way is to move all these 2 features into one microfrontend and bring all the entanglement together, or think of way to separate them clearly. So that's one of the challenges we are exploring, and the hope is, of course, let's build them properly as a microfrontend, but that will need some time and exploration and works together with the feature team.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Because I for me, actually being through this federation architecture and then MFE as well. So Yeah, and I still recall there's a lot of challenges at the beginning, but I guess since we starting adopting the MFE path, I think it's been like 3 years by now. So I think things are moving really smooth right now. Like we actually just shipped our last MFE like within 4 months, building from scratch. Yeah, it's getting much more better than the beginning. So yeah, really nice.
Sharing your experience, Logia. Great to know that.
Cool. Okay, we have one more question can ask. So, okay, that's an interesting one, and I want to use that one as the last one. So if you have a lot of friends, family members, and teammates with different opinions on MFE, and how should you figure out who to trust?
Who to trust? Very interesting. I think we treat everybody like a family and friend. There are certain trust level, believe we works with them. Of course, we like to govern as much as possible, audit every single things. But within REA, other than each team have to, because each of these micro front end is considered a system by themselves, like they are features. And we do have like rules and guides for each system evaluations, make sure they are healthy in certain conditions. We work and then in each quarter we evaluate, the team have to evaluate and provides how healthy is the system and do they conform to certain patterns and things like that. So that's how we kind of build that together. That's like a house rule. So there's a certain level of trust, but at the same time there are certain level of like process we put in place to help that and basically we trust them.
Thanks very much. Yeah, we still have lots of questions here, and I don't think we're gonna have time today to answer all the questions. But yeah, like please keep all the keep watching of the post at REA post, and we might have another event like this to kind of talking about more like mobile MFE or the web MFE in the future. Alrighty, I'm going to wrap up here, and also thanks again everyone to use your lunchtime to join us, and thanks Elisha. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so before everyone leaving, so we actually really appreciate if you can just leave us some feedback. So you can either scan this QR code on the screen, take a screenshot, you can do that later, or when you jump off from the webinar, you'll be automatically redirected to a survey. So please help us to fill the survey and help us to improve in the future. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. See you.